Yes, it is now. It is now. Yeah, thanks. Thank you very much for coming and for your interest in air quality. It's a very important subject still. Thank you for Marylebone Mines and Calvina for all the arrangements. There's quite a lot of slides, quite picture intensive or graph intensive. I'll make the slides available to you afterwards if you want, and anybody else. I'm going to focus primarily on outdoor pollution, which is actually quite different to indoor pollution. Indoor pollution includes outdoor pollution as it comes in, but if you've got good ventilation, then some of the pollution won't linger, just go straight through. Ventilation is really important because indoor air pollution can be really quite nasty, and you need to have it going out, particularly the mould, the moisture. Now, there are also unintended consequences of trying to improve air quality. You have the Great Smog in 1952, that was followed by the Clean Air Act in 1956. But now we've got a very different cocktail of pollutants, which are only recently being found. They're very tiny things. So we've now got the instruments and the medical capacity to do the research to identify their causes and obviously the consequences, which affect from everything in your body. It's really quite serious, I think. Then you've got the issue of the law. The law is rather weak, I find, and it's lagging. The World Health Organization, which is the organization which has set standards, came out with some new guidelines in 2021, and they're about 4 times tighter than the current legal limit. There has been talk of having a clean air human rights bill. That first went into Parliament in 2023 with Simon Birch there and James Jones there. And it's been languishing ever since, which is rather pity. As I say, air quality has improved, but it still kills. And not saying more importantly, but it also means that there's socially and economically, it's very bad for what's the word? Dilapidations. It's very costly in terms of lost income when people are off work, in health, in hospital and so on. She died of outdoor pollution, and the coroners now have on her death certificate died of air pollution. Normally it is a contributory factor, particularly to people who are basically living in poor accommodation. They can't move. I'll jump a little bit now to before. Sorry, one of the slides is all about indoor air pollution, but I'm going to say now that if you want to try and escape the poor indoor pollution, if you're poor, you've got a problem because you have not very good quality vacuum cleaners, or you might like incense because it's cheap. Not necessarily good stuff. I mean, air freshener as well. That's also not very good for you. And this little boy there, he died recently from mould, living in very poor accommodation. Yeah. Sorry about that. No, I mentioned Marylebone, lovely place. Air quality has been pretty poor. It's now much better. I wonder whether, to what extent, poor air quality has held Marylebone back. Now that air quality has improved, let's hope it goes from strength to strength. I'm going to talk about, as I say, 2 types of pollution. There's 2 types. One is gas, and the other is particles. They're very different things. The one most commonly associated with pollution has been nitrogen dioxide, the NO2. That's a gas. Most of that has been coming from diesel vehicles. We've now switched. We're switching away, and electric vehicles are also very problematic because they've got tyres, and the vehicles are much heavier. When the tyres on the road, they give up a lot more road surface particles. The brakes, they give off a lot of, they're very carefully designed, and the chemicals used and the science behind it is very complex. And of course, they're emitted. They call it, some of them are microplastics coming from the tyres and the brakes. And when it rains, it goes into the watercourses.
Oh my God.
And so on. So one's really out of the frying pan into the fire. Are these things predictable? Probably not. But PM2.5 is the chemical that's mostly most concern at the moment because it goes into the bloodstream and into the brain everywhere. But it's only recently started to be monitored because it's quite expensive and difficult to see. And then during the daytime, I'm not going to show any pictures of it, but air quality, nitrogen dioxide goes up during the morning rush hour, then it goes down again, then it goes up, and it goes up. Sometimes more than the rush hour, but there's less traffic. Why is that? The reason apparently is atmospheric chemistry. This interaction of all the different chemicals and sunlight. Another chemical, which is a gas, which is of concern increasingly, is ozone, ground level ozone. This tends to go up when nitrogen dioxide goes down. So if I say, as I say, middle of the day, the nitrogen dioxide is good quality, but ozone is bad quality. So if you want your vigorous exercise, which you touch and go, ozone is an astringent. But most of us spend most of our time indoors. I've talked a little bit about what goes on inside the house. Combustion it's not just diesel, it's combustion for nitrogen dioxide. And methane in boilers is also a very potent greenhouse gas. I don't know if they need it. Wood burning, lots of talk about that. Absolutely should be encouraged. I mentioned, idling. People say, you mustn't idle. Well, true, but what is coming out of this exhaust? If it's a cold day, it might just be water vapour. It might be carbon dioxide, which is what you get from a combustion engine, which you can't see and can't smell. If you can smell it, and it's really dirty colour, then it's probably from the diesel engine. And so it's quite awkward if you want to stop somebody idling. What are you going to tell them? You're polluted. Or are you wasting, contributing to climate change, or what? You've got to be quite careful of who you pick fights with. Sorry. Measuring instruments, they're really quite complicated. This is the best one of all, the nose. If you can smell it, it's bad. Full stop. Or your eyes start tingling. These are indicative monitors. They're all fairly recent invention. I'm not convinced that they're really very reliable. These are much more reliable, and those are absolutely astronomically expensive. The one at the bottom, I think it cost £7 million to install down in Monroe Park. Now those are really important because they can identify what the composition of the particles is. And cooking in this area is a considerable concern. It's actually a greater concern for particulate matter than diesel vehicles or road transport, which is quite a surprise. You can also identify where it's from, typically. It's intensive agriculture, probably from the Netherlands. If it's forest fires, it might be Russia or even Canada, of course, Sahara dust. But they can actually tell you that if you do it with the right science. Marylebone. The first big project I think that Marylebone was exposed to was the low emission neighbourhood. It seems to have been a success. I'm not sure if everybody was very happy with it to begin with. And I wish they'd done a baseline assessment to identify what the air quality was like before, during and after implementation. If they had, it would have been quite useful for proposed pedestrianisation of Oxford Street. Then you've got the Baker Street two-way. That also has been, I think, a commercial success. And we have the Marylebone, North Marylebone Traffic Group, who's represented here. And they have done huge amounts of work, and they provided good input to the Baker Street two-way. Also, they've done a great deal of work around Marylebone Railway Station, and in 2 phases. One, which I was involved in, involved monitoring air pollution in the station itself, and you could, using a special device, you could identify whether the pollution you were seeing was associated with the train departure, and it was. So it's all quite powerful stuff. There was a NMTG, as I call them. They did a great deal of work with schools because they were all concerned that there's a great deal of pollution, what we're going to do about it, but they now felt that understanding it has been a great boon to them, really. Whether it's school streets, Enford Street was one of them, whether it's a bus stand which was moved, you actually still see the where it was. That school, St Edward's, they've now got a green, natural green fence around it on the inside of the metal fence, except of course where there's a gate. You can't grow things off a gate or from the bottom of a gate because it moves. And of course, what have they done? Plastic.
Oh.
But it's green in colour.
Oh dear.
It's okay. It's better. It's better than having nothing. Also, in one of the schools, the school decided to trial an air filtration unit. Now, I'm not quite sure whether they carried on doing that because they can be quite costly to run. And it's all very well having a device which is going to save the planet, but you're not dealing with the problem, which is outside still. Now, get your set on some charts. I'm just going to show you a few charts about Marylebone Railway Station, the environment of it. This one and this one, I've got a little note saying decrease in pollution since there and now. There's been about 10 to 15 units of measure. You've got to remember that number because I've got it right at the very end. Air quality has really declined, improved since COVID. It bounced up again. Bounced up after COVID a little bit, then it's gone down. Not quite sure why, but it has. Then we come on to Marylebone Railway Station. Chiltern Railways have done quite a lot of work monitoring air quality on the station itself. They have found that in 2023, that's the most recent data, much of the worst pollution was here on the concourse and also the south end of the platforms. What they've done, it's really clever, they disaggregated the total amounts of pollution and divided it by what is the background amount from roundabout and what's attributable to the trains. And the numbers here, 65 units, 70 units, that's a lot. As you get towards the end of the covered part, it's gone down to 35, and then beyond it's 10, which is not, it's not nice. But it shows that nitrogen dioxide does decline quickly with distance away from the hotspot. They've actually got a very, one of those expensive reference monitoring devices there, which can monitor the particulate matter, but it's new and they haven't published the data yet. There was another indicative monitor just outside on Boston Place. However, they've been having problems with the readings, should we say. Now this is the big one. It focuses on the trend in nitrogen dioxide since 2004 and now. It's going up and then it's kind of drifted down and then whoosh, it's gone down here. Exactly what caused it is, well, there's been all sorts of policies which that would have contributed to it. But if you say it's the ULEZ, well, people will have changed their vehicle and their route prior to being enforced to avoid the fines. So it won't have happened instantaneously. the legal limit is there, so it was way above. The World Health Organization recommends 10 rather than 40. That is not impossible. It'd be a different lifestyle to us. Wicken Fen near Cambridge is below it. Barnes, wetland in blue here, it's roughly at that amount now. That's COVID, and it's kind of drifting down, but quite a lot. In Oxford Street, there have been 5 monitors, some for the council, some for the DEFRA, and some for, I think, the Grosvenor Estate. But they're all pretty much of a muchness in their air quality, and it kind of drifts down. And again, you've got that gap along Oxford Street, this is important, 10 to 15 micrograms per cubic metre. What happened with the particulate matter? It's not quite the same. The decrease took place primarily between 2012 and 2020. It's kind of, the trend now is a bit ambiguous. I think it's going down, except you've got Covent Garden in green and Oxford Street outside Selfridges, which are astronomical relative to the rest of them. Now, is that an error? I hope it is, and I'm inquiring, double check. If it is correct, then it may be, again, commercial cooking. But the restaurants nearby, I think, are quite good quality, not very much fast food there, which I think is the big cause of some of the pollution. Again, the GLA TfL suggests that in London, road traffic is the leading contributor to the pollution for NO2 and also particulate matter. I'm not going to quibble with that, it makes sense. But increasingly, that's not the case because road transport pollution has improved or got less. What sort of traffic is it? Those bars are much lower than those. That's diesel vehicles, so yeah, but also that is passenger vehicles. The rest of it is commercial vehicles, so it's really commercial vehicles that are a problem, so don't blame yourself if you've got a car. Then pedestrianisation, no Oxford Street. In order to assess where the air quality now, during the implementation and afterwards, TfL, GLA, they've got 9 monitors along Oxford Street. This is the part which is going to be pedestrianised. They're all just these here, and I've named them all. The blobs, the circular ones, those are the reference, those are the cheap and cheerful monitors, the indicative monitors. Those, the square ones, those are much better quality monitors. The colours, I've got the colour code at the bottom there. Most of them along Oxford Street, so in that 20 to 30 region, which is not bad. You've got that one, which I think is not correct. Elsewhere, oddly, where there's perhaps more traffic, taxis and cars, and commercial vehicles, it's in the red zone, 30 to 40. Not to worry about that. This one I rather like, in a way, because it shows where what the causes of pollution are. I'll start with this one, which is the nitrogen dioxide. You can see very clearly it's very intensely polluted, right in the middle of the road. But the roads are not very wide. The pollution decreases very rapidly away from the centre of the road. It really does, and that rather shows it. I'm a bit anxious why Regent's Park and even parts of Hyde Park are the same grade of pollution as most of the rest of the city. I think it's simply because where we are here, maybe it's 25 and a bit, whereas everywhere else is just below 30. It may just be that. Nitrogen, the particulate matter, is much more uniform. there's actually not much you can do about it, because I'll show you in a moment. A lot of it doesn't come from London. The wind blows it in. Now, this is where we get to the interest. I've highlighted put in these squares, the places in Marylebone where some consultants for the council done some good work, and they have made a set estimates of how much pollution is coming from different sources. In the dark blue, you've got outside London. The pale blue is commercial and industrial establishments. Don't know quite what they are. I wish I did, because then you'd be able to identify what the constraints are to improve it, and then we can actually start a bit of advocacy and help you. And then you've got the orange, which is road transport. So there's only three things which you have to address if you're going to improve air quality in this area. It's those three. I've got up by those arrows the estimates for near Oxford Street. If you take that amount there, which is, I don't know, about 5 units, that would be what the effect of removing the transport from Oxford Street during pedestrianisation. Therefore, that 5 would go to Wigmore Street and everywhere else. However, by how much more would that increase the pollution there? If it's 5, but the total is 30, that's a 10-15% increase, which is not insignificant. Add a little bit for congestion, it'll be worse. That, of course, will be straight away when they're implementing it, we'll have just finished. But gradually it will reduce because people will change their vehicles anyway. There may be some road pricing policies which will reduce it. There's going to be less diesel on the road anyway, more electric. So, but the crucial thing is the amount by which the pollution would go up in say, Wigmore Street is that famous figure, 10 to 15 micrograms per kilometre. So really, this balances out to where it was in 2002, which ain't bad.
Can we ask a question?
You made it quicker, yeah.
So has there been any modelling of what would happen in a gridlock situation which affects Wigmore Street and the surrounding streets? In other words, the modelling may be on certain assumptions to do with traffic flow. However, if there is overload on poor old Wigmore Street, which everyone expects, then might we see a much greater increase from the stationary traffic, which simply cannot move.
Yes.
So in other words, it's, you haven't seen any TfL projections, right? And do you have any confidence in TfL's redirection of the traffic?
That is not up to my pay grade. But appropriate, very good questions actually, thank you very much. Then PM 2.5, you've got the same thing again really, you've got huge amounts, about 60% of the total coming from outside London, which is a lot. Then what else have you got? Well, pale blue, that's commercial cooking. The council have got some interesting, they want to send the occupational health people into the restaurants, selected ones if they wanted, and to advise them on the quality of their ventilation system in the kitchens. And if that needs maintaining, then that can be done without very much capital expenditure, and their bills would go down, the quality of working life would increase. So it's sort of a win-win, but it's the occupational health aspect rather than the air quality aspect that will give the council staff access. Then of course we've got the road transport again, particular matter. And you have the same problem, not problem, if you apportion this actually very, very small amount of particulate matter that would go over to Wigmore Street and elsewhere, it's not going to make a great deal of difference. It's certainly not much more than where it was just after COVID. my data sources. These are all fairly standard things. Downloading the data, processing it is time-consuming, boring, powerful. And when people have been trying to get the schools to be interested in all this, and again, NMTG did have a project with considerable support from the council, who have been really very encouraging. The data, lots and lots of lines and data, it actually doesn't invite access to the students. So I don't think they will really use much. However, the Air Quality Matters, that happens to be a website in which I have an interest. That seeks to collate all the data and put it into little charts which make the data much more accessible and to show the trends. I think that's quite useful. The council has actually a very good website from which you can download data, and it has some graphs of all the air quality monitoring devices in Westminster. I really commend them for that. But now, well, I'd like to say one quick other one. This slide is a projection by some consultants that the council hired, predicting what air quality is going to be like in 2040. Yes, it's improved, but that's not relevant in my mind. It's how you get there. And they admit that it's not possible to predict what initiatives the council, GLA and central government are going to adopt to get from A to B. There's going to be all sorts of competition, and this is just their best estimate. And the council has an air quality action plan, which one would hope gives guidance as to what may happen. But like all these things, shouldn't be too rude. If you don't actually, well, the problem with this one and others is that its predecessor did some good work, but that isn't reflected in this. It's just reinventing the wheel all the time. So one doesn't really know whether the previous administration, or the previous, it was 2014 to 2019, or 2019 to 24, whether their efforts really worked. If you're trying to repeat what didn't work and couldn't work without assessing why it didn't work, that's not very wise. But they emphasise more air quality monitoring. That is, I'm afraid, a no-no as far as I'm concerned. There's plenty of it. As I've showed, you can see from the stuff that's available, which I've been presenting, you don't need any more. It just says air quality is going down. It is. How much? Well, it's not really relevant. I don't think it's. And also, central government and local government is primarily interested in the average over a month or the year, preferably the year, because air quality goes up and down, winter, spring, summer, up and down. That's quite important. It also varies during the daytime. Say it goes up from about 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning to about 8 or 9 o'clock, then down again to midday, up again. Note that when I say 8 or 9 o'clock, a lot of children, when they go to school, it's actually about 8:30, 9 o'clock. Well, I think actually the peak in pollution occurs before they go to school. So it's actually not the mums when they're taking the kids to school. Actually, increasingly people are actually walking to school, which is to be encouraged. Didn't have to princes arriving. I'm going to open up for questions now, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Just on your final point, when you said there's plenty of air quality monitoring, so we don't need any more. Is that entirely true in the sense of you might have plenty of air quality monitoring, but if you've got a specific problem, a specific area, and you want to see how it's going to change, then you might need more. And I'm thinking specifically, going back to what you were saying earlier, Oxford Street. Well, if we got Wickmore Street on the front line, I wanted to ask you whether we're asking Westminster, and I think they're agreeing, to supply more diffusion tubes actually down the area that will take the majority of the traffic diversion, Wigmore Street, Henrietta Place, Mortimer Street. Are we wasting our time, or do you think that's a good idea? If we can get them in before the diversion, we should have got a baseline by which we can then revisit it and challenge the mayor, who has assured us all that there'll be no more pollution from all of this. Of course, as much as I like to believe in him, we are a little cynical about that. So if we get our baseline with the diffusion tubes and measuring before this diversion and after, surely that will be a fairly valid exercise?
Yes, depends when the thing starts. Because, as I say, it goes up and down during the year, so you really need
We
start to get...
won't have a year, yeah.
No.
Yeah.
However, you do have access to the data that, that's me doing it, citizen science work. When I show you pictures of graphs, one there, of Marylebone High Street, Harley Street, and Wigmore Street. They're all three pretty similar. That would be useful to integrate with what you're planning, and I actually will endorse that, what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because nitrogen dioxide is the pollutant of primary interest.
Yeah, can I just make one point? The nitrogen diffusion tubes, you put them up in 1 month and you take them down 30 days later. So they tell you the average of what happened during those 30 days. And it doesn't give you any information about whether it's much busier than daytime than at night.
No.
It's probably much busier in-weekdays than at weekends. It doesn't give you that nuance, so it could be chock-a-block during one traffic jam, as someone was asking earlier, and the air quality might be very bad, but you wouldn't know about it in a 30-day average. It's been and gone. Okay, so there are limitations to what you can get out of. You could just say that if someone was living constantly on Wigmore Street, if you even out all the peaks and all the troughs, they would have had the average exposure over that month. That's all it's telling you.
Yes.
You don't need to look at the peak.
At least it's telling you something.
It's telling you something, absolutely. But as James has just pointed out as well, if you want to compare baseline with the future, you have to find the same 3 months of the year, or 6 months, or whatever, to do it. Okay, because otherwise you're going to be comparing, summer with winter, and the levels tend to vary with season.
Yes,
So,
yes. Of course, we haven't got that privilege, have we? Because it's all going to be done
That's
such a
right.
mighty rush. But
Yeah.
even 3 months, say, if
Yeah.
you get that in,
Yeah.
and then compare with 3 months, the same 3 months next
Yeah,
year.
yeah, that's
what I
right.
was asking.
That's
if that
right.
would seem to you to be a valid exercise.
I think so. It would also do something else, which would be to cross-check the TfL monitoring.
I talk about the. Would that be the main monitor station?
No,
that
the
on
indicative
Oxford
monitors,
Street?
the little ones, tiny little ones.
Oh,
Duke
yeah.
Street, Wigmore Street, New Bond Street, outside Vodafone, two of them.
They have some of those on Wigmore Street, yeah.
Yeah.
Where do we find this? Well, I didn't.
On the Breathe London website.
On the what, sorry?
Breathe London.
The Green London website.
Yeah, it's the green, that one.
That one. Okay, that'll show you where the monitors are. Yeah. And final point on this, the big station they've got that's actually on Oxford Street.
Yeah.
How valid would any extrapolation be for the Wigmore Street example? Or would it not be valid at all? I mean, would it be because
You can make assumptions.
they do use it to make series of assumptions, but I don't know what validity that has.
I wouldn't say great, because the type of traffic is different. It's mainly buses and taxis past there. Whereas down Wigmore Street, it's vehicles, commercial vehicles. So I think perhaps not. When it comes to other sources of emission, because diesel vehicles is not the only component. Yes, you could, because there would be some similarity.
Yeah, what I mean is though, once the bus and taxis are moved and they're not there anymore, I mean, is it able, with its sophistication, to tell you something about what's happening a few streets across?
No.
I don't think it would, because it's, as I say,
Right.
the pollution, NO2, decays very quickly away from the source.
Yeah. It is linked to the volumes of, I mean, in the past, I mean, there's more and more and more electric vehicles coming, and I'm very impressed by how many electric cabs there are. Because black cabs, which ran on diesel engines, as well as that familiar knocking sound, which I almost never hear now, that's disappeared. You know, a lot of them have gone electric, and that's made a big difference to the pollution levels. But back in the days when we did just the North Marylebone traffic group, you could tell that the corner of a street where cars used to slow down and turn to Marylebone Station gave about a 30% higher reading than further up, where they'd finished accelerating out to the corner. Okay, so it depends what the engine is doing. You can get incredible differences depending on what the traffic is doing at that point.
Yeah, who's put the foot in it?
So, you know, where you locate your diffusion tubes and things like that is also important.
Yeah.
And these Breathe London sensors, you know, these smaller indicative sensors, as James was pointing out, sometimes they just get variations on their own. One machine to another can be variable. But it depends how close they are to a corner where there's a lot of traffic turning that corner.
I have a question.
Well, thank you for that, James. I'm afraid it brings up more questions than answers.
Yeah.
And what you've painted seems rather bleak, because you're saying electric vehicles, you know, still give quite a lot of pollution. But I will restrict myself to one question and probably talk to you after. We were told in the past that Marylebone Road was one of the most polluted roads in the country. But you haven't mentioned Marylebone Road, and whether pollution there has gone down quite a lot. I know the traffic has gone down quite a lot, I see it. But, you know, from being the most polluted, I just wonder what changes have made.
It has made considerable changes. I think that it's actually on a par with Oxford Street now.
Right.
And again, people have this thing about pollution in Marylebone Road. That's a past. If TfL and GLA and the council really want to get on top of this and to reduce anxiety, they need to be parading the view. But actually, air quality's got a great deal better. The trouble is, if you do that, people might say, why do you need to pedestrianise Oxford Street? Why do you need to pedestrianise Oxford Street if the air quality's got so much better?
But the particulates have gone up because of electric vehicles?
A bit.
Only a bit?
Yeah. I mean, nobody's really quite sure by how much. But the particulates, some of them are metallic, but also because if they come from an engine, there may be some lubricants in them as well. And the lubricants attach themselves and they go right in, and they're just absolutely nasty for the brain and heart.
Oh, yeah.
So it's sort of, EVs are really not the solution to the problem. It's actually rather a bigger problem.
What would you suggest?
Less of one's own transport also means less taxis, I suppose, but more public transport. Change of lifestyle. I mean, it's going to be very difficult because climate change is happening really faster than we want. Now, shall we quickly?
Yes, is it true that a large part of the pollution from transport comes from a very small number of vehicles?
The commercial vehicles, maybe, yes. And we've talked about buses, but they have been changing.
I'm also thinking about motorists who don't know that they're polluting.
Well,
and we'll find out with their MOT.
yeah.
And what I'm leading to is the idea of a more technology-based solution, for example, on Whitmore Street, if it is as awful as people think it's going to be, that you have monitoring of the traffic, which records the individual contribution from vehicles and takes the registration number. And there's a polite letter, first of all, saying, your car has got a problem, and then there's an almighty fine if it recurs. I wonder if that might be something to lobby for, since the mayor is desperate to do this thing, which nobody wants, or few people want. It could be one way of trying to stop the sacrifice of the health of the people about it.
It can be done,
Yes.
and linked to road pricing.
Yes.
Whether it will be is another matter. I can just say once. Oh, come on, let you go first.
Hi James, thank you for tonight, and I'd very much like to see your slides, because
Yeah.
there's some detail I couldn't see from here. Just coming away from Marylebone, I was quite interested in the pollution coming from outside of London.
Yep.
And, you know, we can now go away blaming the Netherlands, Russia, and the Sahara for polluting our city. But what, I couldn't see, maybe it's on the graph, but what percentage of pollution does outside of London represent? Because that's something we don't, as Londoners, have immediate control of. Obviously, there's a bigger question of climate change globally. It's something that's very hard on. But what proportion of...
Well, for particulate matter, 50-60% is from outside London.
Wow.
How much of that is from further afield? Don't know. For nitrogen dioxide, rather less, say 30%. So it's significant.
Proportion. Very large proportion.
Yeah.
It depends on the prevailing winds, I guess. That, it's going to be seasonal. During the harvest time, for example, if the wind blows in a particular direction, you can get an awful lot of, chaff, stuff blowing about. It's very fine particle. We've had the Sahara dust coming over, and we used to export an awful lot of acid rain to Europe in the bad old days when we burned coal gas and so forth.
But the bumps here, they look, oh dear, terrible. That's also a bump that happened everywhere. That is because the prevailing wind changed. That's when, instead of flowing from west to the east, it flew up the Thames. So that, and it's very clear from, you can have the windrows, which, this one. Yeah. Heathrow and Gatwick and all the rest of them, their runways are going east and west, reflecting the prevailing wind. That's more accurate depiction of it. And so the particulate matter will vary according to wind. It's not it's the speed of the wind, it's the height of the wind and the direction of it. It gets a bit complicated.
If 60% is outside London, how can they project that by 2040 there'll be such a drop overall of that PM 2.5?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Statutory authorities have a penchant for collecting numbers
Yeah,
and then not doing anything with them.
I agree.
Do you think, this is a personal view, that they're actually going to use all these statistics in a way that's going to make a difference? It's quite easy to just quote statistics because most people get blinded by them. And I'm not really very sure that they're using them properly.
Just saying we're monitoring is a bit of a cop-out, I'm afraid. This is where, in a way, what I'm doing, to make sense of the data, make it available, promote it, then the government will be more obliged to act. I think they want to do it, some of them, but they're just afraid politically, which is feeble, right? Linda?
Most of my questions have been answered.
Oh, well. But one of the things that really is important for public health is for the government to say, yes, we've made these improvements, we now recognise that there are some other problems from the pollution we've got, because it's a different sort of pollution. And this is what you can do to minimise it. They should be doing that. It's advocacy. People understand it. They know about electricity, Deborah, and his name, Yakub, who died, mould. But people know about this. And the government is responding to it. There's a hunger, I think, for it.
I think local authorities need to be made to step up because quite a lot of their buildings are responsible for more maintenance and mould, and instead of fixing the problems, they send a team of people out who tell you to open the window, which isn't always the solution, and nobody's really dealing with that at all. But that's another subject.
Well, local authorities have a certain remit, which is theirs to deal with.
Yeah.
The GLA has its own remit, central government sets the basic direction, I suppose. But roads are within the management purview of local authorities, apart from the TfL red routes. So quite a lot could be done, couldn't be. But of course, you get through traffic. So what can the council do to amend that? You can have parking fees, depending on how emitting a vehicle is. They're doing that already, actually, with CO2, on the actual air pollution, do different things. No, I wouldn't want to be a councillor.
Did I misunderstand you when I looked at one of your graphs?
Yeah.
That actually the pollution on the road was not the biggest contributor. Where you had your blue and your red and
Yeah.
your
The dark blue, light blue and orange.
yeah.
Yeah. It's not the biggest.
It,
Sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't, depends where.
because roads are easier to control than
Definitely.
commercial
Yeah.
buildings. So,
One of the dilemmas is, of course, that because air quality's got so much better because road transport has changed,
yes.
that's the low-hanging fruit, as they say.
Yes.
And to get it to go lower is quite a challenge. Which is why I'm delighted that the charts have been showing since 2022, thereabouts, it has improved. That's the nitrogen oxide.
You haven't mentioned building construction. That apparently is quite a large contributor now.
Yes, it is primarily for the PM10s, which is a
Right. Yeah.
larger.
Yeah. For the BO10s, yeah.
And I could show a picture, I'm not going to, of a device, but the reference one is outside of Shepherd's Bush. And there was a huge renovation of a building, and you can see the PM10s rise and fall exactly in sync with the construction phase. But again, sometimes the big size pollution, the PM10s, it's fairly localised because it's heavier, it doesn't float around so much.
And not as concerning because it doesn't get into the
Correct.
brain, etc.
Yes.
Yeah.
A question from you, lady? No? Another question.
Yes, what's the worst type of commercial premises? Being sort of fish and chip shop, frying all through the day. Is that the sort of worst or?
Well, when I had one of these devices in a backpack, wandering up Tottenham Road, the worst was outside Brazilian grill.
Charcoal. It's
Okay.
barbecues with charcoal going. But stir frying, very high.
Yes.
I mean, Chinese restaurants, if they're really going crazy with the stir frying,
Yes.
you've got vaporized fat.
Yes.
Okay, and that's carbon
Okay.
black. We all see it in our kitchens. Okay, all that grease from when you smell burnt toast, that's vaporized carbon. That's carbon.
Yes.
I had a wonderful story because James mentioned doing measurements around Marylebone station, and I was wearing this backpack with this machine, and I walked around the station for 2 hours collecting data, and I still had it, and I came home, and as I opened the front door downstairs, I could smell I left a soup to simmer. Okay, and wow, that's my soup, and it's burnt and it was sticking and then it got burnt. I raced upstairs and dealt with the pan and all the rest of the open windows. And then we downloaded the data. And my God, my house, wow! The peak that we had from burnt soup was just off the charts, literally. So, indoor pollution, cooking indoors without good ventilation.
Yes.
If you leave your burnt toast smells inside, you're breathing it for a long time. It's those sorts of things which...
But we are lucky having parks, and Regent's Park is really not bad.
truly is better with the parks that do make a difference, do they?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it will do, yes.
Plants.
Yeah.
Plants, yeah.
But not as much as you might think.
There doesn't seem to be an awful lot that we can do to reduce this pollution.
Well, we can advocate if we've got good data. I agree, it can be very frustrating. I don't know what we can do, because most of us are just individuals. And we mustn't feel, oh, we're blamed for driving cars or flying and these sort of things. It's there to entice us to do nice things, use our disposable income. Linda?
Well, one of the things that's come out of this really is that public awareness is very poor on this. We know about planes and cars and it, but it's often been washed by the motor industry, particularly the particulate aspect. And also the burnt toast. Do people know about burnt toast? Fats in the air, do they know? I don't think they do. So it's up to...
They do if they've got a Dyson air freshener.
Oh,
I got one 4 stories up in my bedroom. If the toast is burned down at the bottom there, I see the thing squeaking.
But I just don't understand that. I mean, I had no idea that commercial kitchens were such big polluters until very recently.
Yeah. It's the fuel they're using to cook, okay? If they're gas or wood burners and charcoal grills, okay? So it's the fuel, number one, and then it's the method of cooking. If you're stir frying, you've got a lot of
Yeah,
fat,
so we need solutions.
and it's and the meat is burning. It's caramelizing.
But I would say that on, say, Chinatown, walks and whatnot, yes, definitely put some air quality monitoring devices in there, and in so just to see the contrast. And then you, again, it's a bit controversial to blame ethnic cuisine. And I would say, what about charcoal pizzas, pizza ovens? Same thing. And you could use the example of pizza, but actually you mean Chinese food or something else, which is a bit
Or
more
blame the Italians.
Yeah.
Safer.
Yes.
Everybody eats pizza.
Yeah.
Would it be in those circumstances surely better air filtration in kitchens would be helpful, so you don't need to stop eating Chinese food, presumably,
No, no.
if we
I agree.
different enforcement.
Extractor fans and
Yeah, and just filtration so it doesn't just come out
But
into
again, in the school, somebody has to pay for the electricity.
somebody has to
Pay for the electricity if you've got a filter in every single room. Okay, but they've got tight budgets. But try
I think catering
catering,
do
yes.
have extraction and filtration in the extractors, because so they're not emitting to the...
Well, the two different things, aren't they? As well, you can
Yeah.
have a carbon filter sort of extracting. I don't know how, I don't know if you've done any work on it, how effective they are, rather than just pulling it out. If you just put it through.
well, I use one, I actually prefer to have my window open.
Quite a lot of
If you can.
domestic
Yeah, well, quite.
extractors do
Yeah,
filters as well, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a big topic.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
interesting. And then you've got to change the filter,
Yes.
which nobody wants to.
But also, it's, the government isn't doing very much on indoor pollution because it's invading people's privacy. They're quite reluctant, and I can understand that. But the focus on outdoor pollution is quite misleading because not much has happened indoors.
But how much worse was this when people were burning coal fires all day long?
Well, those of us of a certain age remember the number of people who had emphysema. There was, I mean, you don't hear about emphysema very much, but normally in a room of this size, there'd be someone hacking their little lungs out throughout the lecture because they had emphysema. And do you remember the buildings being black? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Marylebone was the filthiest, darkest. All the beautiful buildings we see now, which have been cleaned up, it was filthy, and that was all the coal we were inhaling the whole time.
Well, I heard today in the Environmental Audit Committee they were the subject was air quality. And they were saying in Bradford, last year, over winter, 30% of hospital admissions had air quality, air pollution as a contributing factor.
Indoor.
No, overall, not they couldn't distinguish, didn't want to, or didn't
So what
price
is it about Bradford?
Hospital admissions.
But do they still burn coal then?
No, general sources.
There could be spores, molds and things,
Oh, I
because
see.
they're not opening the windows, and you've got, people tend to, put their laundry on radiators, increasing the humidity without opening the windows, and then the bathroom gets mould and mildew and all that.
But trying to correlate hospital admissions with pollution, that really needs to be done more. People are doing it. I think over in Tower Hamlets, one of the hospital areas is doing it as they can. But of course, the NHS is beginning to split. But it's quite a challenge to do the correlation.
Well, we have a lot of very clever scientists. I didn't understand why it can't happen.
They want it, and they're advocating for it. And the great thing about the advocacy is that some of the parliamentarians actually want to do a good job and are listening and need the allies of these people who are very eloquent and very impressive to help stimulate change at higher levels in government. And I think it's going to come. The last one,
Yes, with climate change expected to have higher temperatures,
Yep.
what is that likely to do to air quality?
That's a challenge. I don't think anybody's really thinking about that at the moment. They should be. I mentioned atmospheric chemistry accounts for the increase in the afternoon when there's no traffic. I have found that sunshine in the summer, I didn't find everybody, air quality, the nitrogen dioxide is lower in summer than winter because of all this. So more heat might mean better air quality, but it might not. But also that's just the nitrogen dioxide. You have the ozone is getting worse, and people are getting quite worried about that. Then when I talk about the wind and the direction and the speed and the height at which it comes, that is also part of climate change. And when I talk about the humps, I don't think that's attributable to climate change, but I'm suggesting that people might start thinking about that. Well, Carolina, time for a drink.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all your questions. Thank you so much. I have the emails of everyone booked online, so if you want, I can circulate the slides as well, because I think we all want to look at them in a bit more depth. There's so much in there, so that's great. And if anyone bought their ticket here, rather than booking online and you want me to send it to you, feel free to give me your email as well if you'd like that. We have 2 more lectures as part of this lecture series. They're both bookable online as well. The most relevant to this one is one that is being done by a group at the University of Westminster, and they're testing these eco-bricks, which are essentially bricks that are meant to be sort of sustainable. And they're testing it, I believe they're setting up the testing station on Marylebone Road, so it's part of the campus that they've got over here. So in case anyone's interested in that one, I think it might be up you guys' street, so that's good. But yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for coming.